Covering the community, events, and people of Georgia, Carolina. This is the Means Report. Here is Brad Means.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Means Report. Thank you so much for spending part of your Sunday with us. We appreciate it, and we have a busy broadcast this afternoon for sure. We're going to cover a couple of important topics. First of all, we're going to talk about domestic violence. Now, a few weeks ago, you may have seen the broadcast that we did on domestic violence, primarily as it relates to adults. But the more that our local expert and I talked, especially after the show was over, the more I learned that it is something that deeply impacts younger people as well. So moms and dads, grandparents, and of course young people watching, stay with us for these first couple of segments to find out what you need to know when it comes to teens and domestic violence, when it comes to digital abuse, something we didn't even know about a decade or so ago, and when it just comes to how to maintain a healthy relationship overall when young people are just getting started. A little bit later in the show, we're going to have financial advice for you as well. That's always a hot topic, and our in-house investment advisor, Jeff Ferhman, is going to be here to talk about what you need to know as we wrap up 2012 and get set financially for 2013 and all that it may bring. But let's begin with teens and domestic violence, and what better agency to discuss that with than Safe Homes. They are a longtime friend of News Channel 6, and Ruthie Garcia handles their public relations and their volunteer efforts, and she's back on the set of the Means Report. Ruthie, thanks so much for coming back. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. We don't often think about domestic violence and young people. When you say domestic violence, I picture grown-ups. I'm sure a lot of people do. But tell me what you see or what you hear, just as far as Safe Homes' perspective is concerned when it comes to people who are just dating being abused.
Well, dating violence, as it's often called, is kind of a trending thing. It's in the news, and we're seeing that it's growing to the tune of 1.5 million young adults in 1 year will experience some sort of dating abuse, if you will. 1 in 4 girls will experience it during high school, and the numbers are surprising. And why are we looking at teens? And the reason is that the ages 16 to 24 are 3 times as likely to be involved in a domestic violence or an abuse situation. So.
Well, and the startling statistic out of that 1.5 million is that about 1 in 3 victims, let's just picture mostly girls here, 1 in 3 won't report it even.
Exactly.
Let's start with the overall picture. What do you think leads to these behaviors? Last time you talked about what causes a man to abuse: power, control. Is it the same thing even when we take it to the younger level? Is it still the boyfriend primarily trying to exercise control or power over the girlfriend?
Well, we don't have a lot of statistics as far as the demographics male to female, but we do know that the types of abuse are very similar. Financial abuse is not necessarily so much in the forefront, but the social abuse, isolation / stalking, because it does move over into the stalking area, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, and of course physical abuse.
All right, moms and dads are watching, grandparents are watching. What can we look for? And I know we're going to get into the different types of abuse, and I'm going to get into perhaps warning signs. But what is something just behavior-wise that a mom or dad might notice and say, you know what, this isn't normal, let me look deeper into this?
Well, and that's what we're going to really dig into is the digital abuse. When a young adult is overly worrisome about their Facebook account and whether they have access to email and so forth from the partner, being able to insist on having passwords, and they are worrisome over whether they're going to make their partner or their date, their boyfriend, girlfriend, upset by where they are, what they're doing. They're constantly feeling like they have to check in with them, even over and above their parents.
So so it's okay to say to your child, hey, is your boyfriend, in this case, hey honey, is your boyfriend demanding to know your passwords and have access to your Facebook and Twitter? It's okay to ask them that. It's not being invasive, and they should be able to answer you, right?
Exactly.
Well, as a mom or as a Safe Homes representative, either one, what's a good age for us to give our children permission to have things like Facebook and Twitter and email?
Well, What's a good age is a very good question, and it depends on the parameters that you have at home. I think that the particular age that you're supposed to be for Facebook is 14.
14.
Now, as far as how public it's made, I think that's a very big factor on that determination. I think that parents need to consider carefully how much control, if you will, or how much awareness they have about their children's activities on the internet and so forth, and if they have a cell phone. Some people need to have their children have cell phones for practical purposes, for their own uses. So how much they're allowed to use it, how many minutes they have, who they're calling and when they're calling. It's just about being aware of what your child's activities are.
Should we pick up our children's cell phone after they're in bed at night? Should we go to their computers or our computer and check the history after they're finished? And I can almost hear the parents out there screaming, heck yes,
yes.
We should. Should we?
That's a tough question, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And I think that again depends on the family dynamic. It's very important to balance that fine line between awareness and trust. You don't want to lose the trust because you may not have very much, and it has to be a personal decision from household to household, I think.
Well, that's tough, Ruthie, because you're right. It's such a fine line. You don't want that kid to leave you.
No.
Trust-wise, because once they do, they might not come back, and then you get to the heavier stuff the older they get, and that bond isn't there anymore. Okay, so just kind of feel your child out, see what works best in your household. That's fine. Let's say they do give us access to Facebook or Twitter or email or their texts. What kind of things can we look for to say, you know what, this isn't exactly the most healthy exchange when it comes to how you and your boyfriend or girlfriend are communicating? Are there specific ways that they abuse them digitally?
Well, a lot of times the first thing that happens is wanting to know whereabouts. And what will happen is the young person will say, well, they just want to know where I am all the time because they love me. And I'm not minimizing that. They really do feel that way, as do some adults. They think that having to check in and knowing whereabouts and always knowing every move is just part of day-to-day life. They're so used to it. Those kinds of things. And then there's also on occasion where postings, let's use Facebook again as an example, postings on the wall that are actually insulting the other person and having exchanges that should be rather personal, and that's a whole nother subject, out there in what's really the public eye, going back and forth and arguing and so forth, and just the matter of needing to make sure that they don't put the wrong things on there at the wrong times, and trying to protect their own selves from the other one being angry with them.
You made a good point. You know, we don't really want to discount anything. I think a lot of parents out there see relationships forming and think, oh, it's just puppy love. To the child, it's deeply real and deeply serious.
Right, exactly. It's one of the primary focus of their everyday existence, if not the only focus. I mean, they will lose focus sometimes. That's another way of seeing what's going on. They're distracted from their schoolwork. It's something that can be very subtle, but if parents are paying attention, they may realize that there's something going on that's just not quite right.
It all goes back to, I guess, keeping those lines of communication open. You'd be amazed what little things you can pick up from a child just in a quick talk, right? Right,
exactly. Just sitting down, having dinner, and listening to what they're not saying is oftentimes very telling. If you're sitting at the table and they're not talking about their day, or they don't want to talk about it, and particularly changes in conversation, meaning whereas it was open at one time and now it's starting to shut down, particularly when there's probably a significant other, if you will, in their lives, may be a sign that something's not quite right.
When we come back, I want to talk about Twilight. Congratulations on the final installment debuting this weekend. I also want to talk about 50 Shades of Grey, two things that are out there in the media that perhaps influence people when it comes to dating violence. That's our topic with SafeHomes' Ruthie Garcia, and we'll continue with her in just a moment, right here on the Means Report. Stay with us.